But as everyone knows, Alex, politics is downstream from culture. How can anyone argue that we should step away from the culture wars? That's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is wrong, Fred. You can't. And in fact, I've been a fairly loud voice for the argument that we shouldn't, and that we should be more, I suppose, forward in our views on the culture wars. And I know there is a certain, turning up of the nose by some at the sort of debates that you have out of the culture wars. And of course, by that we mean things like cancel culture and the role of Hollywood and all these sorts of things. They come up. They're very topical. I also think that they do capture the public's attention, and they should. Much of this is more than just policy fluff. It's real stuff. Some of the stuff about women in sport. I mean, that would probably be, that might be categorised differently, but I think there's an element of the culture wars in there as well. So, look, I think the party really needs to now take those fights on, as far as I'm concerned. I think those that we see that we, the sort of conservatives amongst us relate to are people that take those fights on and run with them. It's certainly something that I look for. And, I think we've got to win those debates in the same way we have to win the economic debates. And I will say also that I think, as I said earlier, I think that the economic arguments are often ones that are held across the board in the party. It really is those social policy culture wars, things that are the point of differentiation. And I think they're healthy. I think we should be debating them, and I think we should be standing for them.
Well, you mentioned men playing in women's sports, and someone who brought that to very sharp focus during the election in May was Catherine Deves, who was shoehorned into the Warringah candidacy by the then Prime Minister Scott Morrison. She also drew attention to the practice of transgender surgery and called it mutilation. And she copped a lot of grief for saying that. Now, recently, as you probably know, Alex, the Tavistock Gender Clinic in Britain was shut down. It was one of the biggest operations of its kind in the world. I think the tide might be turning against what I think is a particularly grotesque practice. Do you think Catherine Deves has been vindicated?
Well, look, I think to a certain extent she has been. And I mean, obviously I haven't trolled through Catherine's entire Twitter profile, so I can't comment on every single comment. But, I think the reality here is that a lot of people have a lot of reservations about some of the stuff that's going on, and they should. This use of puberty blockers on kids when, perhaps a more cautious approach to and a different approach to dealing with and treating these conditions is in order. I think is a very reasonable one. I think it's entirely consistent with medical principle to take a sort of a softly approach with these things. But the left don't want that. They want their way or the highway. And I do worry that we are going to see generations of kids that are forever damaged by some of the work that's being done here. Look, I mean, it's horses for courses, as I say. They're always different versions, but in truth, I think the tide is turning a little bit on this, and I think that only comes because conservatives are happy to speak up for it. I wish more were. We've got some very good voices in this space. Senator Claire Chandler and previous Senator Amanda Stoker, of course, was very strong on a lot of this, and a lot of good voices. For the record, I think Catherine Deves is the prototype. I think she would almost be the perfect person for a parliamentary position, someone that does speak their mind. And remember, in a parliamentary democracy, we don't always have to agree with everything everyone says. That's used to be the way it is, of course, prior to cancel culture, and that was how it worked. So, someone that has a view, a very forthright view about a whole range of subjects, I would have thought is the prerequisite. But call me old-fashioned, Fred. I don't know.